As an obs and gynae doctor and busy working mum, I often get asked the question, why did I choose obs and gynae in the first place? So maybe you're a medical student, you're wondering what specialty to choose, or you're just a bit curious about what happens in a hospital, how someone ends up working on a labour ward or treating patients with women's health related problems. So I thought I'd make a slightly different video for you today. Rather than my typical medical educational content, I thought I would answer some of the commonest questions that I get asked about life as an obs and gynae doctor, OBGYN as it's known in America, and also why I chose this career and what are the kind of upsides, what are the downsides. So let's get started. So first question, why did I choose obs and gynae? Well, it's a difficult one to answer. I think it's very personal for everybody, but for me, I always knew that I wanted something that was quite practical. I wasn't going to be able to sit behind a desk all day long. You know, so much respect for GPs, for radiologists, for microbiologists, lots of different specialties within medicine that don't involve being on your feet, up and down, doing surgery, etc. But I knew for me that I wanted a mix of both. And obs and gynae is a mix of medical management. So we do clinics, for example. If you've got heavy periods, you'll often see a doctor sitting by a desk who may or may not examine you because you've already had a scan and some blood tests, and we just do more chatting and prescribe medications. But we also do surgery, and it's a mixed specialty of both medicine and surgery. Another reason I liked it was actually because I really like talking to people, and I like it when my patients can talk back to me. In some ways, I used to think maybe I was just a bit nosy. I liked asking the questions that no one else could ask, that it was kind of, you know, maybe a bit taboo, or asking somebody about their sex life, or asking somebody about their relationship or their vaginal dryness. So, but I don't think it's nosiness. It's just more that I hope I can ask those questions in a way that makes that person feel comfortable, feel that they can open up. And again, there's lots of different types of specialties. Some involve more interactions with people and others involve more just the management side of things. So for example, in anaesthetics, often your patients are asleep. They don't talk to you, and what you're doing is you're saving their life, often in intensive care or in A&E, but you're not there kind of getting little details out of them from their history, whereas I enjoy that kind of talking process, and I enjoy asking those questions and learning about people's lives. Another thing that I really liked about the specialty is teamwork. So with obs and gynae, you are working with different parts of the specialty all day long. You work with nurses, physiotherapists, you work with administrators, you work with the theatre teams. And so you really do need to be somebody that can be part of a team, that can be there ready to lead, because often the obstetricians, for example, in an emergency on a labour ward will lead an emergency or will do the surgery itself. But you also need to be able to work well with other people, and you can't always consider yourself the person that's in charge. Sometimes it might be more appropriate for somebody else to be in charge, and you take a different role, especially when you're more junior. You want to be somebody that's kind of good at both leading but also being part of a team, and those are some things that I do enjoy. Other great things about obs and gynae, it's varied. No 2 days are ever the same. We go from labour ward to theatre to clinic, all around. I've got an opportunity to specialise in different areas as you move forward with your career. So for example, if you're more interested in oncology or with certain parts of benign gynaecology or maternal medicine, you can have a special interest in those things, but you still need to be able to do a bit of everything. So there's loads of reasons why I chose obs and gynae, and I don't regret my decision at all, although there are definitely some downsides which we'll come on to later. But it's not a decision that should be taken lightly and will be very personal to each person. Next question. What are the hours actually like? Well, I work in the UK and we are protected in some ways compared to doctors and especially OBGYNs working in other countries. So for me, my normal working day is 9 hours long, which means it starts at about 7:45 in the morning to be ready for 8 o'clock and finishes at about 5 o'clock, although obviously sometimes things run over. That's the normal days. And then we also have shift work, so we also alternate with certain 12.5-hour shifts as well. And then those sometimes happen on the weekends, those sometimes happen on the night shifts as well. And you go through a rota. So the average hours in a week is 48, but it's rarely that consistently, because sometimes you'll have a week maybe of normal days, you'll have a week of nights, you'll have some nights over the weekend, and you'll have some days off to compensate. So we do have additional days off that compensate us and kind of keep the hours below the average. But in general, it's different every day, but usually 9 hours is the norm. I find the hours in the UK, not too bad. It does depend on where you work. It depends on how well staffed you are. For example, if in the afternoon I am covering an area like maternity triage and there's a couple of other doctors around also covering, we'll all might get through loads of work together and we can all leave on time, or in a clinic, for example, you'll leave on time. But obviously, if we're really short staffed, people have gone on maternity leave, people have left the profession, which often happens, that leaves gaps in the rota, there's less people around, you have to do the same amount of work with less people. And so that that sometimes means that you do obviously finish later, and that has that knock-on effect. But for me, generally, broadly speaking, according to my rota, we manage it okay. What are the best bits? Well, I think I've spoken about the reasons why I chose this career, and obviously those are mostly because of the best bits. You are there in the best moments of people's lives, when you hand them their baby that they've been waiting for a long time, or when you tell somebody who's been struggling with infertility that they're finally pregnant, or you're helping them achieve that goal. So there is a lot of really kind of positive and lovely moments. Of course, there are some difficult moments as well, but in some ways I find if you can help them to manage that situation in a way that is less traumatic for them, I think also that can be a really rewarding experience. So for example, if you have to deal with somebody, if you have to look after somebody who sadly lost their baby later on in pregnancy, again, that's really traumatic, obviously for them and for everybody involved. But if you can make that experience a little bit less traumatic, because you are a friendly face, you are kind, you are caring, you are empathetic, then you can make that even better. And actually that's a really rewarding and lovely part of the job. Again, working with great team members can be a really rewarding part of the job. So there's lots of good bits. I enjoy surgery, and I also enjoy generally when you learn a skill that you get the chance to practice it and you see yourself improving. That's often a good day for me. So if I've done something, a procedure that maybe before I struggled with, and then I get to go back and do it again, and it's easier because I've been practicing or I've been at some sort of course, that's a really rewarding thing as well. So the worst bits. I've probably been a little bit too positive in this video so far, but there are some definite downsides of this job. Clearly, it's an on-call based specialty, and realistically, even by the time you finish your training, you become what's known as a consultant in the UK, or an attending in America, whatever else you call it, you reach the end, you are still going to be always doing on-call work. That is part of this job. That is, whether you're going to cover a labour ward, you're going to cover gynecology on calls, you may get called out in the night. And unlike GPs, for example, who will be, working very, very hard in the day, but they don't tend to work overnight unless they work in a different area, then actually that is something that you have to accept, that even when you've got older children, for example, you're always going to have to bear in mind that you might have to cover sometimes. You have to have an ability that you've got to leave your house in the middle of the night whilst your children are sleeping because you've been called in to attend. So shift work is a downside. There's no two ways about it. It's exhausting. I have to say, at the moment, I'm right at the end of my 3rd pregnancy, and that's when I really realise how physical this job is. Assisting in deliveries, doing forceps deliveries, for example, doing surgery. You're on your feet for a long time. Some surgeries are really long. Some surgeries can be 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours even for certain types of oncology surgery. Not everyone does all of those types of surgery, but it is generally a very physical profession. Difficult if you've got joint pains, if you've got underlying medical conditions. Something again to be aware of. They should make adjustments for you, but sometimes it's just something that you kind of have to recognise that is a downside of the job. Okay, the next bad bit, the training is long. Even if you just do it in one go, in the UK, the training is 7 years. That's long. But actually, the reality is most people don't do it in 7 years. They do it in longer. So I've already been in training for, I think, about 7.5, 8 years, because I've had time out for having babies. I've taken some time out to do extra research and extra fellowship. It is long. Most people probably end up doing somewhere between 7 and 10 years of training, and some people much longer than that, to get really the specialist skills to enable you to do the kind of job that you want to do. So it's long. There's not a rush to get to the end, but actually when you're at the start and you look ahead and you think, well, when will I be earning the maximum earning threshold, etc., OBGYN is not a quick career to get there, especially lots of people sometimes do a PhD or additional degrees along the way. That's great. But again, the downside is it just takes time, and that's fine if you're not in a rush, but for some people they might be. And on that point, it's not the most well-paid profession. We're lucky, especially depending on where you live, there is often the opportunity once you're a consultant to do some private work potentially, but generally in the UK, medicine isn't the best paid of all the professions considering how long it takes to train in it. But if it's something you love, and at the end of the day, you're going to be doing it for, 30, 40 years, I think for me, that's not the biggest downside. You can find other ways of supplementing your income if you need it, and it is still well paid in the scheme of things. But other countries, it is a very, very well paid career. For example, in America, I don't even want to think about comparing my salary that I get here in the UK with someone who is qualified and working, especially as an attending in America. But, there's pros and cons of wherever you live. We can cover that in a different video. Finally, another downside is obviously sometimes things that don't go to plan. And for a lot of people that have this career and in this career for a long time, you'll experience times when something unexpected happens, something devastating happens, and sometimes it might be partly your fault. And not only do you have to deal with the emotions of that, of whatever that outcome was that happened, but often there is an investigation that you might become involved with. You might end up going to court, and that can be a really, really traumatic experience. And I think in the UK, and probably most countries, OBGYN is one of the most litigious of all of the parts of medicine, so you're most likely to get sued, and that can be you personally or that can be as a hospital. Most of the times it's as a hospital, and as long as you have acted within your guidelines, then your department and people usually kind of support you and come back you up. But sometimes things happen, and it can be a really traumatic and difficult experience. And I know for people that have left the profession, sometimes that is what has led to them either burning out or having to leave, because it is really difficult to move forward, not only with guilt or feeling upset with whatever it was that happened, but also because you've got something hanging over you in terms of investigations and court cases. There should be a lot of support in place, but it varies depending on where you're working and exactly what happened. Okay, how do we balance this career with family life? As I said before, I'm now in my, final few weeks of my third pregnancy. So I've got 2 kids already. I've got a nearly 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. And balancing this job with family life is not the easiest. It can be done. I think that's often people's biggest concerns. And I think when I chose this part of medicine, I didn't have a family of my own at that point, but I knew I wanted it at some point, and that was my biggest concern. Am I being selfish? Am I choosing something that's going to suit me but may not suit a family later on? And my kind of view was, let me try it out. I can always switch to a different part of medicine later on down the line if I can't make it work. And we have made it work. But you need good childcare. It really helps to have family support around, which is not easy for everybody. I live relatively near both my in-laws and my parents, and they are brilliant when we have emergencies. Kids can't go to school because they're sick. Things happen all the time. Often there's also things that come up at the school that they want you to be there at 10 o'clock in the morning, and obviously with a job like this you can't just say, oh, I'm going to go and attend whatever event is happening at school unless you're already happen to be scheduled on an off day. My main tips for managing with a family life is being super, super, super organised. I put everything into a shared calendar with my husband at the start of the year. So I put all our shifts in, all of the days the kids are going to be off school, any days that clubs or activities are going to be closed and things like that. We plan out what we need in terms of additional activities, because my daughter's in school, for example, school finishes at 3:30. As I said earlier, my normal working day doesn't technically anyway finish until 5, and realistically that's often turns into 5:45, and then there's an hour's drive home. There's no way I can pick up from school. I can't even really do pick up from an after school club because even they tend to finish at 5. So it is a job that needs a lot of practical help and planning. Great if your partner works from home, but mine is also a doctor. So we have to plan out the after school clubs that we need right at the start of the year, make sure we don't miss the opportunities to actually get into those clubs. And then we have an au pair, which basically means we have someone that lives with us that helps us at the start of the day and at the end of the day. It's great, but it's not always possible to find somebody that's suitable. So otherwise, you often need wraparound and you often need support. And it's really, really stressful when your childcare falls through. And that is just a part of the job that we have had to manage, and will always be a part of having to manage. I wouldn't say there's a lot of help out there for working families in the UK or wherever you are. So nannies, family support, whatever you have around, you spend a fortune. The thing I do is I do work less than full-time, which basically means part-time. In the UK, the way that translates when you're in training is I work 4 days a week and I have 1 fixed day off a week. So that's helpful in terms of being there to pick up once a week. It also means I work proportionately less shifts. So I'm 80%. You can be different percentages of full-time. I'm 80, but it essentially means I work slightly less number of days on the weekend and slightly less number of days on my night shifts. So instead of doing 4 night shifts, I might do 3. It just means it's not for as long that the kids don't get to see me much at all. But again, it's part of the job. I accept that I will be doing night shifts. I have to work some weekends. It's good because I do it, mine is like either a Friday and a Saturday, or I just work the Sunday, so I split the weekends. Other people's just work a whole weekend, less frequently if they're less than full time. You can often manage how it works for you, but it's not the easiest. And again, it takes organisation. Have a lot of conversations with the kids about why I have to go to work and when I'll be back and able to see them again, and they just accept it. That's the life that we've got. You do get days off to compensate, so there are other random days that we have, what are called 0 days, that sometimes help to have an opportunity to see the kids more. But organisation is key, planning ahead, school holidays really difficult. And again, what we have to do is think about it well in advance, book in the camps or plan our annual leave so that we're off when the kids are off school. Now, the common question is, what is the weirdest thing that I've ever removed from someone's vagina? There are a lot of things that people get stuck up their vaginas. We don't judge, we are just there to help. But I have had situations where people have put lots of different foods and things inside there. That can get difficult. Garlic was my least favourite, I think, because that was there for a while and became really smelly and also a bit embedded and difficult to remove. Now, the common question is, how do you become an OBGYN? Well, in the UK, it's part of a training program usually. So what that means is you go to medical school, you do 6 years at medical school, then you've got to do foundation training, which is usually 2 years. So FY1 and FY2, where you rotate through different specialties. It's really good to get obs and gynae as one of your jobs for that, just so that you have some experience. You can confirm if it is something that you want to do with your life. And then if you choose that that is what you want to do, you then apply to speciality training, which is when you get a training number and you run through that training until the end. There are other routes into obs and gynae training. There is an entry point when you at ST3, which means if you're somebody who's got a bit of experience in obs and gynae, you can apply for that, but not too much experience, because if you're too highly trained, you won't be able to apply for that position. Or some people who have trained abroad in obs and gynae can come over to the UK, and they may have a more difficult route in order to kind of show that their training is equivalent, but there is a way of qualifying in obs and gynae in the UK, even if you didn't do the training program. But the simplest and most straightforward, if you're UK based, is to go into training from the start, from ST1 to ST7. If you already know that you want to do obs and gynae, then you need to show your interest. That's what you want to spend your time doing. So if you're at medical school, make sure that you're going along, talking to people doing the job, work out what the good bits and the bad bits are, try and get involved with projects, audits, presentations, so going along to conferences, being part of the medical students obs and gynae societies, anything that shows that you're interested in that career that you can demonstrate later on is really helpful. And a question, what does a normal day look like? Well, as I said before, a normal day is completely varied. So every week I will get a rota, which tells me where I should be on each day, and each one is completely different. So it's split into morning and afternoon, and then sometimes there's the evening if you're working on call as well, that evening. So the morning might say something like a clinic, antenatal clinic, gynae clinic, and there's lots of different types of specialty clinics within that. It might be a menopause clinic, it might be a antenatal diabetes clinic, so it could all be different types of clinics. So, and then the afternoon might be somewhere else, it might be covering a maternity triage area, it might be going and assisting in theatre, it might be covering elective cesarean sections, or it might be just working on the labour ward, or you might be working on a gynae on call. And every single day will be moved around different areas, which is great for the variety of the job. It's difficult because we don't have a lot of continuity of training. This is the way that training in the UK works. Sometimes, and when I took time out of training, I was still working as a gynaecology doctor, but specifically with one team, where I actually had a lot more consistency to my weeks and my days, because I did certain clinics, I did the same clinics every single week, I did the same theatre list every single time, and I had more continuity because I was able to meet people in clinic, I was able to talk to them about an operation we might be offering them, book their surgery for them, be there or do that surgery for them, or assist in that surgery for them, and then see them afterwards when they had that surgery. We lack that in the UK at the moment in general training, and that's just because of the way that the hours work, and the way that we need to get access to a lot of different areas as part of the training. But coming back to what the day looks like, as I say, just divided into morning and afternoon. Might start at 7:30 or 7:15 if you need to be in theatre, but generally your day will start at about 8 o'clock and then go on till around 5 o'clock if you're working the evening. So you work the 5 till 8. You'll do a normal day potentially in clinics or theatre or wherever else, and then sometimes cover the on-call from 5 till 8 p.m, or you might cover the on-call all day from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. So it does depend on where you are and what you're doing. But if you're on an on-call will look like either a labour ward on-call or a gynaecology on-call. You're usually on one or the other, although you might be able to assist in both if they get busy. And then a labour ward on call will usually start with a ward round, going around and seeing everybody on the labour ward, and then just waiting and seeing what happens depending on the day. You might be needing to assist in deliveries, you might be taking someone for a cesarean section. You might sometimes have just some time sitting down and waiting and just watching the monitors, reviewing people again as they come throughout the day. And gynae on call, you'll often be called to cover in A&E or the emergency gynae unit, so to review patients, to see them, also a ward round at the start of the day, I should say. and then seeing emergencies as and when they come in. And sometimes someone will need to go to theatre in the middle of the day. They might come in and be diagnosed with an ectopic pregnancy, which means that not only do you need to go and see them, take their history, start any emergency management they might need if they present in a particularly difficult, life-threatening situation. You might have to give them blood transfusions and things like that. And then when they're ready, or when you're ready, you may need to take them to theatre. You might need to do the operation, or at least assist in the operation with a senior, with a consultant, or if you are the consultant, that's the point when you might join the team and meet the patient as well. So it's very varied, and it depends on where you are in your training and what you're covering on a particular day. But like I said, it's kind of one of the pros, but also one of the cons of the job. So I hope that was an interesting way to deep dive into what the life of an obs and gynae doctor is like. If you've got any questions that I haven't covered, please let me know in the comments below, and I want to do a follow-up to this video if you like this format. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video if you enjoyed it.